Morning, everybody. It is Turnaround Tuesday. It's 10 a.m. I know last week we tried it at 6. Not that we won't do it again, but we decided to come back at 10 o'clock in the morning due to we have some events tonight. I'm actually going to give about 30 seconds for people to sign in, because what I've been told in the past is I start going and people haven't really tuned in yet. So we are live, correct? Mine is not popping up, so for right now I can't see anybody, but we'll give it about 30 seconds, then we'll get going. But you are in the right place. So mine's not coming up, but that's okay. We'll get going. So anyway, and I promised not to hit the table this morning. So thank you all for joining us this morning. I can't see the live feed. So I'm just wondering, hold on folks. No, let me just see if I can get the live feed here. For whatever reason, my feed's not coming up, but I'll start going anyway and see. Give me a second, everybody, because everybody else is telling me they're live. And for whatever reason, I can't see our video live. But okay, well, you know what? Shay's with me this morning, and she'll pass me the questions. Good morning, everybody. Boy, it's been a whirlwind these last 3 weeks, and if we've seemed a little rushed, if you've been following us on our Facebook page, to date I think we've had 15 county conventions. We've been all over the state. This week we'll still be on the road traveling so much, but this week we're going to talk about agriculture and cannabis and hemp. This is our fifth week of 8 weeks of Turnaround Tuesday. We're getting a lot of great feedback. I really appreciate everybody kind of tuning in and watching us on a weekly basis. And what I'm more proud about, by the end of the week, depending on the topic, we've had 2,000 to 4,000 people around New Mexico tuning in and making sure that you're seeing our opportunities and stuff. So, but let's get started this morning. I really appreciate it. You know, we talked about the last 3 weeks. We've been at 15 county conventions. But more importantly, the last 2 out of the last 3 weeks, we've had 5 gubernatorial forums in the last 5 months. And 2 of them, all 4 candidates on the primary Democratic side have shown up. So it's been a great conversation. But what's amazing to me is 2 of my opponents that have over 50 years political experience continue to talk about what we can't do in New Mexico. And it's just frustrating. Because folks, it's time we start talking about what we can do. I'm tired of hearing that we can't create 225,000 new jobs because a congresswoman basically tells us it's non-credible. And when she becomes governor, she'll put a realistic plan together. So I just ask you, what's that plan? Our plan is 225,000 new jobs, and 4 weeks ago we laid it out. We've been on the campaign trail now for over 10 months, and past July we laid out our plan because we did over 70 town halls around the state, and we talked about how we're going to turn New Mexico around. We talked about how it's time for New Mexico to invest into big ideas, into a new direction. Because folks, as I've talked about, this is it. This is our moment. If we don't invest into New Mexico now, we may never get out of 50th. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm tired of being on the campaign trail and listening to my opponents who have literally 50 years career experience talking about what we can't do. So we've been talking for the last 8 weeks of what we can do. And yes, folks, we can create 225,000 new jobs. Yes, we can invest some of that $23 billion back into New Mexico, into small business, into agriculture, into our opportunities. We can move 8% of PED's budget back into our schools, into our communities, and create pathways. In fact, if you go to my personal Facebook page, you will see an article about how we need trades, not only in New Mexico, but in the U.S. And we continue cutting opportunities from our kids and our young people and those opportunities. So we're going to change that. And yes, we can give teachers and educators a raise and 3% annual increases for every state and educator in our state. So let's start talking about the big ideas. Let's start talking about what we can do. Let's talk about, creating 225,000 new jobs. Let's talk about investing $1.4 billion back into you, back into agriculture, and back into what we can do. So that's what we're going to talk about today. When we start looking at agriculture, and you start looking at cannabis, Our plan for agriculture and investing back into agriculture, we're estimating the first 6 years in office, we can create an additional 6,000 to 10,000 jobs. In fact, we talked about it our first week in Turnaround Tuesdays. So we can do that, we can invest in that, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But also when you look at cannabis and hemp production, both on the medical side, on the research side, ancillary tourism jobs, and recreational legalization, 32,000 new jobs, over $200 million of new tax revenue for our state. Again, a great opportunity for us. Now let's start off with agriculture. Now we know agriculture is a key part of our economy. In fact, that was our first economy. If you've gone to my town halls, if you've seen our speeches, if you've seen me talk about it, agriculture was actually our first economy. And in reality, we exported to France and Spain. And those are our industries. It's still a big chunk of our industry across the state. Now we know down south, pecans, onions, dairy, alfalfa, those are industries, right? Onions, chili, those are our industries. But how do we expand and grow on that? Now we know about some of the water issues, and we can talk about water. We can talk about how we can circulate water better. We can talk about how we can save water better. We can talk about how we can irrigate better and save money and save water. What we can also talk about is how do we expand our strengths? And I think everybody knows this. We literally, I'm now back on live, so I now see myself. What we can also talk about is how do we expand Sorry. I just wanted to go back on so I can see some of the folks that are on. Good morning, everybody. I finally got our stuff on. Morning, James. Morning, Eric, Charlie. I see some of the names, some of the new people that I haven't seen in the past, but some of the same people. So thank you for joining us this morning. But let's get back onto it. You know what? Can you go turn down the heat because it is getting a little hot here. Sorry, folks. The studio, our fancy studio here, it's getting a little warm. So anyway, so what we can talk about is agriculture. Now, how do we grow that? And how do we expand on that? So let's talk about two things. So here's an example: pecans. Now we know we're the largest pecan grower in the world. In fact, where's the numbers? We do over 27 million pounds of pecans in the world, and we're 27. We produce 27% of the pecans in the world, and that's great. But we also talk about how we ship our pecans to Mexico or to China, but we don't create any value added. Now, value added are opportunities that we can do with those and basically take our raw materials and create products with it, whether it's mixed nuts, desserts, food products. So that's what we're talking about. We are not going to touch the pecan growers. In fact, we're going to help them grow and expand, and that's a great industry for us. But how do we create value added within that? And then stop shipping it to Mexico and China and maybe create those value added jobs here within other products. Let me give you an example. If you don't know, Southwest Cheese, it's one of the largest producer of cheeses in the world. Guess where they're based out of? Right here in New Mexico, in Clovis, New Mexico. Now we know we've been dairy farmers for years. And back about, I think it's 10, 12 years ago, they chose to also get into the cheese business. And now, I'm going to take some notes right here, but now they literally use 3.8 billion pounds of milk. They produce over 30 million pounds of cheese, and they're now one of the largest producers of cheeses in the world. And they export around the world, from Clovis, New Mexico. So here is an idea that we know since I was a child down in Las Cruces. We have been dairy farmers, milk producers for years. When we talk about value added, we took the raw milk producers, our core industry, and we created a cheese product out of that milk, value added agriculture. And now, when you take a look at that, and we've talked to them a few times, when you take a look at that, you're literally talking about $38 million worth of salaries and economic growth for Clovis. You're talking over 400 employees, and they've expanded 3 times in the last 10 years. So think if we added that to pecans, to chili, which we are doing some value added for chili. But that's when we talk about opportunities, and that's what we're going to work on today. Now let's talk about the North. We know in the North, go ahead and close that. We know in the North, that we can grow products up there. Again, big agriculture. Right here in central New Mexico, there's no reason that we shouldn't be getting into the vineyard business. I mean, we're doing some of it. But over 200 years ago, we were actually one of the largest vineyards producers in the northern hemisphere. So again, folks, opportunities. But what's happened in the north over the last, and central New Mexico, what's happened over in the last 20, 30, 40 years, our agricultural growers have actually, we've divided our acreage. So they're so small now that we can't really produce things in mass quantities. Now in the 70s, you've heard me say this before, in the 70s, we're the third largest producer of apples in the country. Today we produce less than 0.5% or about 0.6% apples in the country. So we know we can grow fruits and apples and things like that. We import 94% of our goods. It's time we start selling our goods right here within agriculture. And then, hey, let's export those out. So now we give examples of two things. I propose that we invest into co-ops with the private sector, with our agriculture brothers and sisters, and we produce that together. And let's focus together, creating co-ops. Let's focus on 2 or 3 things. Now, these are examples. I'm not saying we have to do this, but these are examples. So apples is a natural. We were one of the top apple growers in the country 40 years ago. Let's get back into doing that. And yes, we may not be able to create apples that Washington State or California, but we can create value-added products with apples, with apple cider, apple sauce. We can export our apples to South Korea, to Cuba, to South America. So again, opportunities. So one of our proposals is let's invest into agriculture, let's invest into co-op within apples. Now the other thing we've been talking about, you might have heard, is hops. Now you take medical out of the state of New Mexico, you start taking a look at it, the second fastest growing industry in New Mexico are breweries. And in fact, Albuquerque, right here, we're in Albuquerque today, right here in Albuquerque, I believe, Shay, we were ranked 7th in the country of the best breweries in the country. And in fact, C&M and some of the community colleges that have started brewery degrees. Now look, I don't know anything about brewing beer. What I do know is the 7 or 8 brewmasters I've talked to and the 7 or 8 brew people that I've talked to, they literally buy all their hops from Oregon, Colorado, Indiana, Kansas, Idaho. Guess what grows naturally in northern New Mexico? Hops. In fact, 15 different types of hops. So our proposal is let's invest together, let's create a co-op, and let's create hops opportunities for our local breweries and even barley. And then, hey, here's an idea. Why don't we invest and expand and start exporting some of this? So that's what we're talking about in agriculture. And if you go look in our details at apple18.com, you can literally see what we talk about, how we can create a co-op within hops, how we can create co-ops within our industries today and into our strengths. So that's what we'll talk about today a little bit. The last thing we're going to talk about, and I'll answer questions about it, is cannabis and hemp. Now you've heard the story, I'm sure. New Mexico was the first state in 1978 to sign the Medical Marijuana Research Act into law, where we can start testing medical marijuana. In fact, the state of New Mexico was the first state. And yes, you've heard before what governor signed it into law, my own father, in 1978, Jerry Apodaca. Never knowing 2 years later, his own son, would use medical marijuana to go through chemotherapy. Now, 38 years ago, I was stricken with cancer my senior year in high school. In the first 6, 7 months, I took so many pills and so many shots that my right thigh, I couldn't feel my right thigh. But none of it worked. Lost 38 pounds, lost all my hair. I was nauseous for 14, 15 days out of the month. And I remember, I guess because I was 18, I remember in the spring, they told me, I remember them talking to my parents and saying, hey, you could try medical marijuana. So I tried it. My grandmother was in shock. I could eat. I wasn't as nauseated. So I know the benefits. It got me through that. I lived it. Now, I came back and played football, and because of my aggressive snow skiing, my wife tells me, and because of my football days, I now have a lower bad back. And 2 years ago, my back went out, and the doctors, thank God I didn't have to do surgery, we went to rehab, but the doctors basically gave me Vicodin. And I was taking 2 to 3 Vicodin a day to get through the pain. And a dear friend of mine from Las Cruces actually introduced me to his daughter. And his daughter works for a health company and they sell CBD oils from hemp. I'd heard about it, but I never used it. I started using CBD oils, and I now use CBD oil every morning on my back, and I've not taken a pain pill for my back in almost 1.5 years. So we know the medical benefits of it. We've learned recreational, we've learned medical from other states. We've seen the opportunity, we've seen the good and the bad, and we've seen how we can educate, and we've seen how we can regulate. That's the key thing, how we can regulate. So when you look at cannabis and hemp production, when you look at agriculture jobs, when you look at ancillary jobs, when you look at distribution jobs, between the two, and some of my opponents are saying, I'm wrong on these numbers, and no, I'm not. 16,000 new jobs within the cannabis community will be expanded between medical and recreational. If you throw hemp in there and you start talking about ancillary opportunities, we're talking about 32,000 jobs in the state of New Mexico and over $200 million in new tax revenues. So you're going to continue hearing from our campaign about big ideas, about investing. This is it, folks. This is the moment. This is the moment that either we're going to stay the same status quo with my opponents, or you're going to invest into new ideas, new technologies, new ideas within agriculture. And don't tell me we don't have the money. Because we have $23 billion of investment funds, and we have over $3 billion sitting around in our other accounts that we all, our bankers and our state investment council, invested outside the state. So by moving 5%, just 5% of our money, your money, and move it back into New Mexico, we can invest into agriculture. We can invest into cannabis and hemp. We can invest into our strengths and create 225,000 new jobs. So that's kind of a quick summary of our agriculture plan within our economic plan. Now, again, I'm going to open up to questions, but you can always go to apo18.com, apo18.com, and download our jobs plan, download our educational plan. And as we continue rolling things out, we will continue rolling our health plan out and things like that. Now, you can also basically, this is our 5th week, so you can always go back and you can look at first week on our video. You can look at the first week and talk and see how we break out our jobs plan. You can look at our education plan, our television and film. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we announced in television film that we're going to announce an international film, that we are going to launch an international film school right here in New Mexico, bringing 1,500 students to New Mexico and training New Mexicans and being a pipeline for the film and television industry. So that's our plan. I'm going to open it up to questions now. The first question, actually, I ran into somebody last night, and we talked about it, and it was Emily and Ed. And they talked about how they're not going to be able to do it, to be live on. So they asked me the question last night as I was traveling. And they're into 4-H. And the biggest concern they have, and they're completely right, because I've heard this across the board, is, and Emily and Ed, thank you so much for your question, is the majority of our farmers, the majority of people in agriculture today, the average age is like 60 to 62. And so the big concern is, how are you getting the young people involved? How are you getting the young people? So we have cut so many programs out of our high schools. We've cut so many funding out of our high schools within agriculture, within trades. So you're going to keep hearing me talk about how we're going to move 8% of PED's budget back down into our schools and our communities. You're going to hear me talk about trades. Now that's also agriculture. We have to invest into our kids. Now some of our young people have really innovative ideas. And some of the young people I've talked to, they don't want to be pecan farmers like their families. But they see opportunities within pecans. They see opportunities that are value added. So that's what we're talking about. So that 5% that we're going to invest into, we're going to make sure our kids are getting mentoring and training programs. And you're going to hear me on our education plan, we talk about creating pathways. There's no reason we can't create a pathway within agriculture in middle schools and high schools and start investing into our kids that are interested in that. Because yes, agriculture is 10, 12, I believe, Shay, 10, 12% of our economy. We have to invest into the next generation. And that's making sure they have that. But we also have to give them the resources and create co-ops and funding. So when they want to start, they'll basically can do a 2.5% low debt finance loans, and we can invest together. Now, let me also tell you, I've talked to the Secretary of Ag, I've talked to New Mexico State University, and within their department, we have one of the top agriculture research institutions in the country. And we're going to really invest with them and work with them to really expand agriculture. Because not only do I want to develop and grow agriculture for New Mexico and start growing some of our own, but we need to expand some of that and start exporting more, but we're going to create value added. So Emily and Ed, thank you so much for that question, because it is very important, because we do see that across the board. The next question, Robert from Taos. As governor, what community farming programs would you support? Actually, Robert, thank you so much. That's a great question. We have a program for that. The community farming, I think, is huge important, and that's what we talked about, the co-ops. So right now, let's talk about, because you're from Taos, Robert, let's talk about northern New Mexico. Northern New Mexico over the last 20, 30 years has literally been expanded, or we've broken up the land, right? 100 years ago, families up there owned 100, 200 acres. Today, we splintered the acres, and then development has come in and splintered it some more. So that's why our proposal is, let's work with the communities, let's bring low debt finance loans in the community, let's bring federal grants in the community, let's educate folks in Taos for those added value opportunities. Now again, we went back to what I said earlier. When you look at the northern part of New Mexico, when you look at the valley, what is natural for us to do? Apples, fruits, organics, I believe hemp and hops. But my point is if we don't work with the community up in Taos, if we don't work with the Espanola Valley, Rio Arriba area, if we don't work together and collaborate, and when I talk about collaboration, I'm talking about, Robert, I'm also talking about with our Native Americans and our brothers and sisters and our Native Americans, pueblos and tribes, how we can co-op and work together on that. So that's what we're talking about also. So 100% we're going to invest in that, and I believe co-oping or creating co-ops within the community farming. So Robert, I hope I answered your question. Now let me tell you something else. I believe, and it's happening, Robert, it's happening up in Taos. It happens right here in the North and the South Valley here. Our veterans, we have a veterans program with our jobs plan. We have a veterans program within agriculture, how we have to invest with our veterans. And our veterans have created some great agricultural programs here. One of it, it's great therapy for them. Number two, it's great job creation. And then creating veterans job opportunities. And with the SBA, Small Business Loan Administration, and with our federal government, we can literally get more federal contracts. And let me tell you something about the veterans. We get about 0.5% of contracts, federal contracts, because of our veterans, when we can get up to 3%. So our goal too is not only invest in community farming, but invest into our veterans programs to help them get more federal contracts within agriculture and across the board. We've done the math. You're talking about just with the veterans businesses, we can bring in $20 to $25 million of more economic growth. So thank you so much for that. Lisa from Las Cruces. Thank you, Shay, for writing this, because we're getting a lot of questions today, and there's no way I can keep up with this, so I really appreciate this. But Lisa from Las Cruces, how can we better promote our agricultural goods outside the state of New Mexico? Lisa, that's a fantastic question. And in fact, it's frustrating. For a person who's worked in the private sector, for a person who's an entrepreneur, who's built businesses, built small businesses, big businesses, who's worked around the region, who's worked around the country for 32 years, we don't promote ourselves enough. And I think part of it starts right, Lisa, it starts right here in New Mexico, where we can promote ourselves and promote our own goods. But again, right now, we've become hundreds of centuries of agriculture that either we export those out or we use it right here. Our proposal is, how can we promote more New Mexico goods? One, let's promote New Mexico goods within New Mexico and start selling local to ourselves. Let's start selling it to our schools. Let's start selling it to our high schools and our programs and get them involved. But yes, key, let's start exporting. You know, we're not going to talk about immigration today, but you know, Trump is talking about let's build a wall. We've talked about the whole time, let's build relationships with Mexico. Let's build trade programs. Let's build opportunities there. So I think that's what we're talking about. But absolutely, Lisa, our goal is to not only promote agriculture, we have to promote outside. And then what we don't capitalize on enough, again, when you look at University of Kansas, when you look at Texas A&M, they're one of the top agricultural research institutions in the country. Well, we sit on one of the best down in Las Cruces, right there, New Mexico State. New Mexico State is one of the top agricultural universities. And we have talked to them, and there's no reason we can't do more research and get more federal grants, private grants, and then investing together with our universities to create more opportunities within research, within hops. Let's make better hops. Within cannabis. We could be the leaders in that. And that's another reason how we promote our agriculture. So Lisa, thank you for that question. Joe from northern New Mexico, what opportunities do you see for cannabis in New Mexico? Well, Joe, that's a great question, and we'll talk about cannabis. First of all, we know the medical benefits, and I kind of gave a summary about that very quickly. But we were the first campaign, and there's one other campaign that has agreed to this. The other two are kind of saying, we got to see the perfect laws, right? So we know the opportunities within cannabis. Now, we know the medical benefits, so let me talk about this very quickly. Within cannabis, we know the medical benefits. So the number one issue, as governor in my first 30 days, people are asking me, what would you do in your first 30 days? The first thing I would do is I would create a separate board to regulate medical cannabis. Right now it's being regulated, and I've been talked to the cannabis experts, and they're being regulated by people that don't understand the industry. So I create a separate medical cannabis board that literally regulates and manages the cannabis medical industry before we can create recreational. So that's number one. Number two, the first thing I would do also is I believe, and we can all debate the numbers, but right now we need to at least triple the size of the plant count per license. Today in New Mexico, the statistics I've looked at is we have 48,000 patients that need medical cannabis, but we only produce up to 10 to 15,000 for that. So I have been told, and there's a little debate going on within the medical cannabis world, I understand that, but I have been told that we are producing maybe a third to 40% supplies for the demand. So we're actually creating a black market, I've been told, because there's not enough cannabis there. The simple thing, Joe, is we can invest into expanding the licenses, and I believe I have these numbers correctly. The average license here is like 400 plants. Colorado's like 1,600 plants. So we just need to expand that within the medical. Now, recreational is going to take a little bit longer, but we can legalize recreational, expand that, and we would regulate it within the medical industry. We would regulate it within the legalization side and grow those opportunities. And yes, we will create low-debt finance programs for all New Mexicans, because I want all New Mexicans to have the opportunities with that, but it will be regulated by your industry. It will be regulated by medical cannabis or recreational cannabis experts, and I have talked to many of them in Colorado and Oregon and right here in New Mexico, and we will put a cannabis regulation group together that is managed by your own industry. And that's what we think of that. So Joe, I hope I answered your question. Charlie, I think Charlie's been on many times. Or maybe it's a different Charlie. And Charlie, I don't know where you are. How can you create local finance for small startups, farm projects for specific crops? Well, Charlie, that's a great question. So let me talk to you about this. And you've heard me talk about this many times. We talked about it in a job program. So our state has $23 billion of investment funds, right? And we invested all outside the state. We invested into Texas. We invested we invested in Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma. We invested outside our state. So all we're going to do is we're going to move 5%. We're going to move 5% of our monies, which is $1 billion, 1.4 billion. We're going to put 400 million into technology startups and technology industries, into verticals, which we talked about. Then we're going to create $1 billion low debt finance loan at 2.5%. That small businesses, and I'm talking about agriculture, and I'm talking about special projects like hops co-ops, that can borrow with this and be involved in this program and can borrow the money against it at 2.5%. Now, we're not going to give you the money. You're going to have to come in. You're going to have to show a business model. You're going to have to go through the regulations, but you'll be able to get a small business loan at 2.5%, and you'll pay the State Investment Council back at 2.5%. Now, my opponents are telling me we can't do this. My opponents are telling me we can't use that money. Now, remember, those are investment funds. So we're not going to give it to you. We're not going to allocate it out of the funds. We're just going to invest it back into New Mexico, into 95% of our economy, which is small business. And so that's what we're going to do today. So I hope, Charlie, I hope I answered your question. One other question, we just got another question for Bill about co-ops. Bill, I think we talked about it earlier, but co-ops, our proposal specifically up north is to create co-ops. You're going to hear from me, and maybe it's an old football term, because I love talking about sports, right? Ex-football player that I am. You're strength in numbers, right? And my wife thinks I got it from Gladiator, by the way, but I used it in high school. I used it as a team captain. Strength in numbers. It's a team effort. New Mexico, we have to start collaborating together. We have to work with our pueblos and our tribes. We have to work with the Republicans and the Independents and the Libertarians and the Democrats. We all have to start working together and collaborating together. Hey man, the other day someone said, this is the year of. Guess what? This is the year of New Mexico. This is the year of New Mexicans. I'm tired of my opponents talking about what we can't do. It's time we start talking about what we can do and creating projects and creating co-ops and investing back into New Mexico. I think that's what we can do. Brooke, I do agree with you. Let's lead, let's not follow. Go Appo. I agree with that, Brooke. Thank you so much, Brooke, for that, because it is about that. Let me see. Let me ask you, one of the questions I forgot about, they asked me last night at that reception, is how are you going to deal with the federal government? with cannabis. If we legalize cannabis or expanded medical cannabis, how can we do with it? Now, there's a couple things. One, if you've seen, yes, Sessions came out and said we're going to go after, we're not going to turn our heads anymore. Look, the Constitution, and this was asked at the forum the other day, the Constitution is literally talked about, the Constitution is to give the rights to the states. And the Constitution is really, it's the United States of America, right? You'll hear me say that. It's the United States of America. And so, constitutionally, we have to worry about the feds and federal regulation. But I believe as a state, we have the right to do, manage and opportunities ourselves. So what I think we can do is we can work with the federal government and making sure we can regulate and do medical cannabis and expand the recreational. Now, you have seen, and I think the count is 21, 22, I'm not really sure, but you have seen 21, 22 attorney generals and U.S. attorneys within those regions and districts and states that have said they will not come down on states. And I really can't tell you what our U.S. attorneys have said here or our attorney general, but you have literally had Republicans and Democrats in Colorado, Republican U.S. Senator, Democrat U.S. Senator, and the Attorney General and the Governor. By the way, let me remind everybody, Governor Hickenlooper was against cannabis when he ran for governor 8 years ago, and he has now changed his mind. And I've literally had to sit down with Governor Hickenlooper, and we've talked about agriculture, we've talked about trade, we've talked about those opportunities. So we believe the states will, and even if it went to the Supreme Court, we believe and I've talked to lawyers about this, we believe constitutionally they can't really do that. Now the banking issue is an issue, and that's why there has been talk about creating a state bank and not being regulated by the feds. We're not against that, we just think we have a better way to do that without having to create another bureaucracy of a bank and keeping the money here in New Mexico. Not a bad idea, we've talked about it, not a bad idea. But also, there is conversations right now, and I don't think I'm leaking anything out, there is conversations right now at the Pueblo tribal levels. They're looking at opportunities to get into the banking business. And I think, again, let's collaborate with them and work with them. So I think those are some great things. Brett asks from Santa Fe, what's up, Norteño? I don't know if, I love saying Norteño, by the way, Shay. How do you see the exporting of consumer products and cannabis legalization supporting tourism? Brett, that's a great question. People, first of all, let's look at Colorado. Colorado, everybody talks about cannabis is exploded in Colorado, and everybody's talking about how Colorado is, it's driving the economy. Well, I got to be very frank with you. Cannabis legalization and medical expansion is not driving Colorado's economy. It's only 4 to 5% of the economy. Now it's helping, absolutely, it's helping. But they've invested into infrastructure, into job training, into technologies and new technologies. That's really what's driving their economy, not cannabis. Now, it has helped. But what no one talks about outside Colorado, what no one talks about here, which is amazing to me, is Colorado tourism is up 32% in the state since they've legalized it, right? Since they've legalized cannabis. And I don't even know the statistics I don't know the statistics that you see in Nevada, but we know Nevada, when I talk to the experts in Nevada and the legislators and the politicos in Nevada, that was the big push for Nevada, was legalizing, and not just for their citizens, because I believe there are only a million people, a couple million people in Nevada. It's not much bigger population than us. But they did it for tourism reasons more than anything else. So you're going to hear us talk about ecotourism. And we talk about ecotourism, it's just not regulating cannabis and tourism coming here in cannabis. And yes, we think there's opportunities. But you're going to hear about ecotourism. You're going to hear, and there's some land commissioners running for land commissioner that we agree on this, and we talk, and the reason I bring up land commissioners, because it's state and federal lands, and we'll need the land commissioners to do this. But ecotourism is a huge opportunity for our state. In fact, Colorado probably does 4 to 6 times more tourism than we do, not because they're bigger, not because they have nicer places, but because they've invested into that. So we look at ecotourism not just within cannabis or medical tourism, because we also look at medical tourism also coming here for our universities and our medical opportunities. But we look at ecotourism with hunting, fishing, biking, outdoors, things like that we are just not capitalizing on. And when you go up north and you look at Dulce, you look at Chama, you look at the Four Corners area, everybody goes literally 45 minutes away on the other side of the state. So those are things that we just can't, those are things that we're just not capitalizing on. So we believe that, and yes, I talked to the mayor of Taos the other day. They just invested $24 million into expanding the Taos airport, which needs to be done. We've talked about Las Cruces. Las Cruces need to expand their airport. Not that the airport in El Paso doesn't work, but if you want ecotourism, if you want the movie industry, if you want industries to come directly into your community, they're going to have an airport. Now, it may not be mass transit airports, but your venture capitalists, your investors, your movie executives, your CEO executives, they need to get in and out. They need to create direct flights. So that's what we would do too when you come talk about ecotourism. So Brett, I hope I answered your question. Let's see, we got another question right here. Do you have a plan to strengthen the education in our state, and can we please get your professional sports team? And that's from Cody from Clovis. What's up, Cody? I will be honest with you, Cody. I grew up a Cowboy fan, and I'm not going to dog anybody, but the new owner of the Dallas Cowboys, when they hired Barry Switzer, and if you're a Barry Switzer fan, I'm not an Oklahoma Barry Switzer fan, so I kind of moved away from the Cowboys. But I'm also a Raider fan. So I grew up as a Cowboy fan, Cody, but I'm also a Raider fan, and I love the Raiders. And part of it, when I was a kid, Jim Plunkett, I met Jim Plunkett. I'm not going to say I got to know Jim Plunkett. I met Jim Plunkett. I don't know if anybody knows this, but Jim Plunkett is partly Native American, and his family's actually from Las Vegas, New Mexico, I believe. I know it's the northern part, or maybe up in the Raton area. And then I became a big fan of Coach Flores, who was the first minority coach in the league back in the 70s and 80s. And I just became a Raider fan. I'm a big Marcus Allen fan, so I'm a huge Raider fan. And I'm very happy that we got a new coach. I think we have Carr as a great quarterback. So that would be my professional sports team that I cheer for. And I guess I always focus back to football. I'm a Laker fan, and kind of hard right now with NBA going on with that. And then I'm a Dodger fan when it comes to baseball. And that's just kind of growing up here. Now, I will tell you, some of my Dodger fan friends were upset at me this year because I did cheer for the Houston Astros over the Dodgers. But I had to cheer for Bregman. I had to cheer. There were two New Mexico boys on the Houston Astros team. I can't go against New Mexico. So yes, my Dodger LA buddies were upset at me that I supported them. But strengthen our education. Let's go to that. Strengthen our education. Absolutely, Cody. We have a plan. We talked about education 2 weeks ago. So Cody, you can actually go back. Our educational plan is actually on our website at apo18.com. And we have another Facebook Live that we did 2 weeks ago about education. So go back and take a look at that. And we're going to have our plan. I'll summarize it very quickly. 0 to 20, early child intervention, early family intervention, after school programs, creating pathways for our kids, and yes, investing 8% of PED's budget back into the classroom. We're going to make sure Clovis is basically educating your kids, not Santa Fe. And that's what we're going to do with that. So I ask you to go with that. You know what? We've been on the air now for about 38 minutes. We try to keep it for 30 minutes. So there's Matthew has, why should business invest in New Mexico? Well, let me tell you something, Matthew. Thank you for the question. First of all, businesses are not invested in New Mexico. In fact, that's one of our biggest conversations. 83 to 86% of the money that comes into our state are federal state employees, or state and federal contracts, or state and federal dollars. In fact, most businesses won't invest in here. And what they tell us is, and I do business around the region, I do business around the country. What they say is, you don't put any skin in the game. You don't invest in infrastructure. You don't invest into your kids. You don't invest into education. And what we do is, when there's successful businesses here, they come and they pluck them. They literally give them $4 or $5 million and say, hey, grow the company in Colorado, grow the company in Arizona. So that's why businesses, they actually don't invest in here. So that's why our plan is, let's invest $1 billion of our money back into New Mexico, right? And by investing into that, 95% of our economy is small business. So we can grow our own. Let's grow our own businesses, and let's help medium-sized businesses grow. Let's create mentoring programs and mentorships, and let's grow 95% of our economy. Now, I'm not against spending $200 million a year on programs outside the state to help bring businesses here. Now, I'm not against bringing the Facebooks here. But the millions of dollars we gave Facebook, now I get they're going to drop $1 billion here, and that's great. And they've created 1,000 construction jobs over the next 2 or 3 years. But when all that construction is done, it's basically 58 full-time economic-based jobs. Those are good-based jobs. But it's basically, that's it. And so my proposal is what if we put that resources and that money into New Mexico businesses and help New Mexico businesses grow? Now let me give you an example. Mesa, Arizona, Tempe, Phoenix, right? The reason Apple's going there, the reason Intel is moving from here to there, the reason Microsoft and Google have moved campuses there and have built businesses there, it's not because it's a right to work state, it's not because they have tax benefits. I mean, that's all part of it, the tax benefits, but that's not why they moved there. They moved there because the governor and the state invested into a little university called Arizona State University. And 10 years ago, and I might have the numbers off a little bit, but 10 years ago, Arizona State was maybe 20, 30,000 students. Today, Arizona State has 70,000 students. It's a major research university. It's a major platform university. And major companies are moving to Arizona because of that, because they have a trained workforce, they invest in infrastructure, they invest into themselves. And before I end the day, I'm going to just say one last thing. Colorado has $550 million in their investment funds. We have $23 billion. We have the third largest investment funds in the country. Now, why do you think that is? Because Colorado invests into infrastructure. Colorado invests into small business. Colorado invests into Coloradoans. We don't do that here. We actually take our money and we invest into Colorado companies. We invest into Texas and Oklahoma and Wall Street for a better return. I'm not against that. But you're going to hear me talk about we're just going to move 5% of your money. By the way, Matthew, it's your money. It's not the state's money. It's your money. We're just going to invest it back into New Mexico to invest into our infrastructure, to invest into big ideas, and to invest into these type of ideas. Because we need to turn New Mexico around. So look, I don't think we have any more questions we need to answer. We got a few more, but I'm sorry about that. Send it to us. We'll kind of, but you know, we're at the 42-minute mark. We tried to say we're going to keep it at 30 minutes. I can't believe we're already at 40 minutes, by the way. Thank you all for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. Again, it's about investing into Mexico. So let me make this very clear to you all. And please pass this around, share this video around. This is it. This is our moment. We have 4 months to the primary. And if we don't win and we don't have your help, all these ideas are not going to get executed because guess what? We're running against opponents who have literally have been in the process for over 50 years. Got one question for you. How's that working for us? Their 50 years experience have driven us to 50th in education, 50th in job creation. And then we have all this money. It's time we start collaborating and we collaborate with big ideas, a new direction for New Mexico. So New Mexico, this is it. This is your moment. So I ask you to join our campaign, make a donation, volunteer. We still have 2 or 3 weeks of delegates. Go be a delegate for us. Get us on the ballot. And then together we can turn New Mexico around. So thank you all very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Next week, the number one issue in our state next to jobs, like I said, the number one issue is jobs. The number 2 issue in our state is crime. Now we know why we have crime. We have solutions for it. We have ideas for it. I want to hear from you. Next week, we're going to talk about crime. We're going to talk about solutions for crime and how we can invest in lowering crime and making sure New Mexico is a safe place in every one of our communities and create pathways and opportunities for New Mexicans. So thank you all very much for joining us. I haven't said this yet, but how do you like our big new sign? That's pretty big. That's a pretty big sign. Anyway, thank you all so much. We'll talk to you next week. Now, one last thing. Thursday night, Impact New Mexico and the New Mexico Medical Cannabis Patient Alliance. They're actually hosting a town hall. They've invited us to come talk about medical cannabis and legalization and talk about the industry. If you're interested in that, look for us on Facebook. It's at 7:30 Thursday night, I think for an hour and a half. Look for us on our Facebook page or go to their organizations. Looking forward to talking to the cannabis industry, the medical industry. This is an opportunity. So join us Thursday night at 7:30, either Facebook Live here or go to their Facebook Live. Look forward to talking to everybody. Anyway, next week, crime. Thank you all. Follow us at Facebook and our website. God bless you.